let's just do a quick roll call. I'm just curious to see who all is here. Do we have providers? United Family Services, you guys here? Okay. Let's see, OCC, Southwest Arkansas, East Arkansas. You guys just came in. Where? East Arkansas, East Arkansas, and Madeline's here. SAYS. Okay. Let's see, who am I missing? CJS. Ooh, big group here. Let's see. CYS. There. Who else am I missing? CSI. PCA. HR. Good. Phoenix. Youth Bridge. CCI. Anybody else? All right, cool. That's good. Well, anybody not signed in? Does everybody have the agenda and the training manual? All right, if anybody doesn't have it, just feel free to get up and walk up here. This is very informal. We are videotaping it, so be aware that if you walk up here and get handouts, you will be on camera. At least briefly, but that's okay. We're all looking great this morning, so don't worry about it. I am Carmen Mosley Sims. I am the Assistant Director for Community Services for DYS. You may have known me in other forms as Lisa Hutchinson or Elbert Grimes. This is my current incarnation.
Our avatar.
Yes. But Tracy Steele, our director, is going to be here this morning, and he was wanting to make a few introductory remarks, but I wanted to go ahead and get us started. You're here for training on our new outcomes measures tool, the instrument that we're going to be implementing starting July 1, and also training on how to make sure that your data and your organization's data is getting into the right track the way that it should. How many of you are already familiar with the outcome measures process? Okay, that's good. Good number of you. How many of you are pretty sure that your organization is already doing outcome measures consistently on every kid that crosses the threshold? Okay, good. Fewer of you, but and that's kind of why we're here. I know that some agencies have had some trouble either getting the information into the right track or applying it consistently to all of our youth. And we're here today to give you this training to improve the instrument that we're using, because outcome measures are so critical to what we're doing. They're critical to what you're doing. And more importantly, they're critical to getting more resources to do more of what we want to do. Whenever we go to the legislature, whenever we go to foundations, to outside funding sources, even just when I go downstairs and talk to the DHS director, we have to justify any request for additional resources. We have to answer questions about how we're using the resources that we already have. And these outcome measures, this instrument is the critical piece to demonstrate what is working, what isn't working, where do we need additional resources, what is working in other areas that we need to implement in the rest of the state. This is what this is going to tell us. And so we have to have this information on every kid that you guys come into contact with, because you are the bread and butter of what DYS does in the state. Everybody knows about the residential piece of DYS. That's kind of the public face that everybody thinks about. But really, what DYS does in terms of the impact that we have on the kids in Arkansas, that's what you guys are doing. And so if we want a barometer of how DYS is doing for the kids in this state, then we need reporting on the outcomes for your kids. So I hope that you find this training valuable. The process itself is going to be relatively painless. So if you have questions about how to implement it, if you have any questions along the way, just please speak up. I think that Madeline and Janice are going to tell you more about the format. So if they want questions at the end or along the way, they'll let you know that. But I see that our director is here, so if you can give him your welcome, then he'll get us started. Tracy Steele.
That's not that time.
It's not.
It looks different.
Let me say welcome. It's good to see everybody. How's everybody doing? Good, good. I usually have to travel 4 corners of the state to see all these individuals, and I think some new faces I may not have met yet. I've seen several in my travels, Fort Smith, all around the state here. I really do appreciate you coming out. This is really, really important. I know there's been a lot of work already put into this. I want to thank Madeline for her leadership, and Scott for the work they've done, and Carmen has really embraced this. I mean, till we get these outcome measures, it really sets the tone and gives us a tremendous guide for where we're going. You can make a lot of progress, and if you can get out in your car and you can take off and you can drive until your tank runs out of gas. But if you don't have a destination and don't know where you're going, you're really not going to be getting anywhere. So in essence, this is kind of what we're talking about today, kind of getting a path and getting a destination and knowing where we're going, how we're getting there, and how we're doing along the way. So it's critically important that we focus on these areas. And I hope Carmen had already mentioned, besides this meeting, we are also tremendous advocates of all the things that we're doing at DYS. We're working hard each and every day to improve services to our kids. And just want to also remind you, some of you, we've talked about this before. I know some of our directors and at your provider meeting that we mentioned, but some of you may not know, we are reestablishing the statewide juvenile justice conference this year. It will be in October, last weekend in October, and it will be in Hot Springs. That's as much information as we can give you today. After next week, we have to go through the state process and the official meeting process. We can be more specific about where it's going to be. We really do solicit your help, your attendance, and coming to the conference last week in the month of October in Hot Springs. So I want you to start making plans now. Again, I just appreciate you. I'll be around some today to visit with some of you and answer any questions.
Thank you, Tracy. All right, I was just stalling before. Now I get to say what I was really coming up here to say. So, good morning, everyone. I do want to introduce the committee that has been working on this instrument. I came on board as assistant director in February. By the time I started coming to these meetings, most of the work had already been done, and so I really would like Madeline and Janice, Melissa. John is not here.
Yeah, he is.
Oh, John.
Back row, just like church.
And of course, Mickey is no longer with DYS, but he also put a lot of work into this, Mickey Yeager. If you guys could just stand very briefly so everybody can see you, so we can recognize the work that you've done. Thank you very much Tracy did mention the conference. The dates on that will be the 29th and 30th of October. That is the last week. It's a Wednesday and Thursday. It's not on the weekend. So I hope that you guys can all be there. We are going to be talking to you more about that conference, and hopefully by then we will be able to get some data from this new instrument so that we can give some good news to some people about the effectiveness of the work that you guys are doing for our kids. Madeline's going to get us started this morning with the Performance Client Intake Outcome Record, which is the new tool for outcome measures. If you would give her your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carmen. I saw some people come in So, did everyone get the agenda and the handout? Just make sure they get it.
I
My
know.
folks from Eastern Arkansas, we don't let them go anywhere very often, so they kind of get lost when we ask them to come to the lot, but they made it in, so. You understand how that goes. I want to thank Melissa here for supporting me. She's going to support me because I want to try to spice it up a little bit. This instruction manual is pretty bland, like I showed. And, you know, I basically put it together, so it's my fault. You know, I'll take credit or not credit or criticism for that. But I don't know how exciting you can make an instruction manual, but we're going to talk a little bit about, first let's see the performance tool itself. Carmen mentioned that this is a new tool. Some of you who have been around for a while know it's not entirely new. It is new and improved. It is revised version. It is a remake of an old movie. I know Bonnie probably might know when the first one was implemented. Do you remember when the first one like this was implemented, Bonnie?
About 1985.
Okay, I think that's right. And then our organization has been using the format of this for several years now, as Tina and Jessica and Cricket can attest to. They're probably going to be like Horseshack going, ooh, I want to say something about that as we go through. Probably y'all don't know who Horseshack is, but that was from Matt Potter. All right, but this is the new and improved tool. And before we get right into it, let me go to my little PowerPoint and let me just give you a little bit of history. It's not, we started trying to do this. This is a presentation that I did to the Oversight Committee April 4th of 2012 about this. So that's when we started formally trying to push this through. And I've got some other information on here. Yeah, who is involved or affected by this process of collecting the outcome measures? Well, the Division of Youth Services and the community-based providers, the clients that we're serving, and really and truly, as Scott Tanner always pulls me back, the system as a whole is affected by this. And he's good at keeping us on track with all that, knowing that the system as a whole is affected by the process, and whatever it is that we do, it's going to be affected. I wanted to just give you a little bit beyond Arkansas and beyond youth services, but managing to outcomes in an era of scarcity. We're in an era of scarcity. I know all the 13 community-based providers know that because we haven't had an increase in a significant amount in 12 years. So these are some best practices when you're trying to have outcomes and you don't have a lot of resources to deal with that. Hear the constituent voice. In other words, you should always listen to what your people are telling you. And also assess to learn and do learn. And that's one of the things that our committee has talked a lot about, is learning from this process so that we're not just trying to measure and say, well, you're not doing this well or you're not doing that well, but we're trying to learn something beyond that of what's working, what isn't working, how can we do that. And apply rigor with reason. And I felt like, I kind of fought that battle for a while, that we do want to be rigorous in our measure, but we can't measure everything, and we've got to pick the things that are the most important to measure. And we talked about that, be practical, and create a learning culture. That's very important. We want to make sure that this is important to us, that we're going to learn from this experience and that it's not just all about a bunch of numbers. And we also want to have an honest appraisal, and it's okay to disagree if you don't like something, you know, or if you think that it's not showing what it needs to show, that's fine. Oh, Bonnie, there it is. When it was started. 1986. Okay, let's go back to the tool now and pick that up later. I think that, you know, when we talk about learning from something and not being discouraged if things don't go well the first year, I mean, we can see that in some of our experimentation in our own agency when we've used a tool or a method and it didn't go well. I'm going to use a sports analogy, which is really weird for me. It's only half a sports analogy. It's half sports and half spiritual. So Pepper Rogers coached at UCLA back in the 70s, and then he went on to coach the Memphis Showboats, which is kind of how I had that name recognition because we're right there on the border. His thing was the wishbone offense, and he pushed the wishbone offense. The first year he was at UCLA, he got so much criticism for it, and they said, this isn't working. The alumni alienated him. Everybody in the organization said, you're going to have to change. We don't want to do this. This is not working. It's not good. And he said, this was what he said about it. He said, well, you know, it's kind of like Christianity. If you only use it until something goes wrong, then you didn't really believe in it to begin with. So that's kind of how I feel about this particular method and tool. If we only use it until it goes wrong, and it could be true for community-based services too. We know that they don't always work. Everything we try doesn't always work, but we believe in community-based services in least restrictive environment. So if we throw that out anytime anything goes wrong, then we didn't really have much faith in it to begin with. So let's try to put our faith in this process, and with more rigor that we utilize this process, hopefully we'll have better outcome. Okay. The top section of the form is just your basic information. If you look in your instruction manual, it just says general case information. Also, if at any time, just raise your hand if you have a question, if you don't understand something, and we'll try to clarify. We know that we are going to have questions, and that everybody has their own idea about how to play some of these things are supposed to be done. The date of intake, what the committee had decided was that the date of intake, that the caseworker met with the client, opened the case, and the effective date of service in the right track system. That's the date that's going to go there. So that each time that the community-based provider opens a new case under the DYS contract services utilizing the right track database, billing and tracking system, they're going to need to do one of these forms. Okay? There is a note to that. Okay? If a non-custody case is opened and closed more than one time in right track during the 6-month period, then the CBP should default or revert to the first intake date to complete the outcome measurement process. It's in your manual. Look on page 3. Look at the note. And this did come from your agency, I think. The question came from your agency.
Yeah.
Page 3. You've got date of intake, and then you've got a note under that. So that if it's open and closed more than one time in right track during a 6-month period, then you should default or revert back to the first intake date to complete the outcome measurement process. So you wouldn't be having several cases of the same kid that you're trying to follow this process on, if you do it within the 6-month period. And we're expecting this to be resolved in right track so that there won't be any issues with that. Melissa's nodding, so that's good.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Can we ask questions now?
Yes.
Okay.
You better.
Okay, so you were saying that if we do, okay, now what if we have a case, it opens, say for instance, 410, and then, we close it out. Then we receive another, case to open it back up. How does that work? Because you're still gonna have that termination in there. Do we have to call Melissa to get the other one out or open it back up?
We're expecting Right Track to resolve that, so that if it's in less than 6 months, you're gonna
You
revert
won't
back.
count the termination for that one.
Right.
You would have put it in because you didn't know, but if you get another one 2 weeks later, you're just gonna go on with that first intake. And Right Track's gonna ignore that termination.
For this process.
So would you
Okay,
have to put a new intake?
Yeah, but the
Or
termination
just
is still gonna be in there.
But for your reporting, it would ignore it.
You're not gonna put in a new client, this new one, you're not gonna put in. You're gonna if it's in less than 6 months, you're gonna revert back to the original one.
But you still would have to put a new intake.
Yeah, the
Because you have to open the case back.
Just saying, use the same
We're
intake.
talking about this intake.
You have to do an intake general services form, but you do not have to do this form.
We're speaking of intake with regard to this form here today. You're not gonna have to do a new one of these. You're gonna revert back to the original one that you put in. If you open and close the case within 6 months, or you open it, yes,
But she said, you don't want to cut that.
sorry.
Yes.
So we're not gonna put in termination?
You'll put in a termination, but if you have another case, it will be ignored in all the forms. It will be invalidated by the opening of the case.
Right Track will automatically shut that term.
That
I
first
understand
one.
what it's going to automatically ignore that termination.
Right.
Yes.
That's what it
Oh, it's gonna
means.
not throw it out,
That's what I'm
that's
saying,
what-
yeah, it's gonna ignore it, it's invalidated, it's gonna ignore it.
Right.
Madeline, can you repeat the question and how it's resolved for the camera so that people that are watching at home can?
Okay. If you open a case and you close it, say, a month later, and then a month later you open it again, you're gonna, for the purpose of outcome measurement, you will revert back to this original record in Right Track. You won't put in another one. Okay? Do you understand? Does that make sense? So
So-
you will not be doing the 6 month you will be doing it for this, and everything will come under this, it won't come under the new case, okay?
So 6 months after the initial intake, the first intake,
Right.
you will do the 6-month assessment. And then for discharge, overall discharge, you'll do the termination, and then 6 months after that. You will not do a new intake if it's within 6 months of the first intake.
Right. This is not the juvenile services form. We're just talking about this measurement. Okay?
So let me ask you a question. So what you're saying in effect is that whatever date that you put on that form here, it would be 6 months from that particular date.
Right.
That's what you're saying.
If you reopen the case exactly 6 months, then you just do the 6-month follow-up, not the intake.
For non-custody cases.
This is non-custody.
Custody aftercare cases we'll get into.
Yeah. This is non-custody.
And Melissa, if I may, as we make progress on this, Right Track is going to be able to send a prompt on those intervals of when whatever we're calling this form will be completed. So that will help provide some clarity on when that form needs to be completed.
And the prompt will take the form of,
No pressure.
when you go into the use case.
And then you go into Right Track.
This is what we had hoped for when we first implemented this in the last fiscal year for the prompt. But that didn't happen, and what we have now are reports that you can go to and see. But we're hoping that this is we're counting on this being resolved in Right Track, starting July 1, so that this will work the way it's supposed to work according to this manual. So you have this manual to go by. So let me tell you, if it doesn't work the way the manual instruction says, then you need to let us know.
Please do. I mean, if it doesn't
Yes.
work this way, if your workers, people that are inputting this data, if they're not getting the pop-ups the way that you expect, or if you're having trouble keeping track of which report is due on which kids, let us know. Don't just not do the outcome measures, because we need to know right away if we need to fix something.
Okay. The next part is agency worker, and that would ideally be the caseworker that filled out the form with the person, the kid, or the family that's going to be working with him. That's what we want there. Don't just want the person who entered it in right track. We want the person who filled out the form and the caseworker or the person that's assigned to the case. The date of birth hopefully is self-explanatory, and the social security number. Let's go back to the actual form itself. This part where it talks about the YLS CMI risk level if administered. If that has been administered, then we want you to put the level that it was assessed at in that area. If this is the only thing that was administered, the only service that was provided, then you would not fill out this form. Okay? That's also a note.
I have a question.
Okay.
When you're talking about the agency workers, in our agency, we have a worker that is not a caseworker, but does intakes. So when it says here agency worker, you're not putting that person's name down, you're putting the person that's actually going to be on the case.
Well, I can't tell you within your organization how you want to do that. I mean, that, you can make that choice if you want the intake person to be the, but you're not going to be able to tell, if you don't put the caseworker that's working with the kid, you're not going to be able to see any trends and patterns in being effective or what happens if you don't put, the person that's working with them. But that would be up to you on how you wanted to do that.
And I'm sure that Madeline's going to touch on this later in her discussion, but these will not be used for accountability on individual kids. So, you're not going to have somebody that's following up on you and says, well, I see that Johnny didn't make any progress at his 6 months. But these will be used to track trends and overall patterns in the services, not just in your area, but all over the state. But at the same time, the agency worker, the name that you put there, if by chance someone was going to be subpoenaed to testify about the data that is on this page, it should be the name of the person that would need to be subpoenaed to answer those questions. Not just an administrative worker who is keying it in or taking information that somebody else is giving them. It needs to be somebody with some knowledge about this.
Any other questions about that? Also, if your agency wanted to use this information for their own purposes, it's valuable to have the person who's working with the kids name there as well. If your agency wants to look at that trends and patterns. Okay, services administered by the community-based, also the address and the telephone number is the client's address and telephone number. The client's name, address, and telephone. At intake. The services administered by the CBP, you would want to put that in at intake, what you're initiating that day. At the other intervals or events where you would do the follow-up on this form, we're expecting that to be self-populated and right track. But for this first time, you haven't given any intake, you haven't administered any services yet, so we want you to put that in. And then other services received, if you know of any services that are being received by another agency, there's a list in the appendix at the end of the manual. There's a list of services. If you know that any of these are being received by the client, then you would want to enter those. Like if it was somebody besides your agency that was doing the services. Okay? The services administered by the CBP, if there are several, I know you don't have a lot of room there, we want you to use those service codes that are in your contract. The and you did understand that if the only service that you are providing is the wireless CMI, you do not do this. You understand that, right? That's kind of been an ongoing question there. So, do you have any questions about that first section? Okay. The next one where it says circle 1, intake, 6 months discharge, 6 months discharge, 6 months after discharge, exactly. You would circle one of those. If it's your intake, you would circle the intake. If it's a 6 month after intake, if it's a discharge, circle that. And if it's your follow-up after discharge, you circle that and the day. We have like definitions too in the manual on page 4 of what intake, 6 month discharge, and 6 month after discharge means.
So in right track, you have to look into that and serve which one you're doing.
No, you're doing it on this form, and then you're going to be giving it to the person who enters it in right track.
It's a drop down at right track.
She's going to go through the right track instructions after we go through this part. This first part is kind of for the person who's filling it out with the kid.
And the intent was to make the form as simple as possible, because we know that the frontline worker would be able to do that and circle and then hand it to Janice Justice and get that to Melissa. So we tried to make it as user-friendly as possible. It's a work in process, because the more experience we get that and more feedback, we can refine it. But the intent was that for the frontline worker to circle and check.
So did y'all hear that question? They were asking about how you would enter that in right track, and Melissa's going to cover that. It's going to be a drop-down list. She's going to cover that in the section about right track instructions.
But it will be 4 different forms if you have each, like intake and then 6 months is another form.
Right. You'll do this and circle it and put it in your file. After you've given it to the person that puts it in the right track, you'll either put this in your file and print it out from right track. But you'll have a hard copy. It won't be on the same form.
Let me ask you a question.
Yes.
I noticed you're focusing on 6 months. What if you have a kid that's 4 months?
Then you wouldn't do the 6 months.
You would do
You
that.
do termination, right?
You do the termination,
Right.
right?
Okay.
If they terminate before 6 months, then you don't do the 6 months, you do it at termination. Okay? Janice?
You may be going to cover this, but the difference between the 6 month for non-custody and custody cases.
Yes. There's some notes here under where it says circle 1. If an open non-custody case is committed to DYS, complete a discharge of this form, PCIOR, for the non-custody case, and complete an intake on the DYS custody case in conjunction with the opening and closing of right track. Do you all understand how that works? See, some people nodding. When a non-custody case is closed due to DYS commitment, you do not do the 6 months after discharge. For the closed non-custody cases, this would be a duplication. Because the case is being followed as a custody case now. So it's just a transition from the non-custody to the custody case. Okay. Also, if the custody, when you do a custody case, when you open a custody case, you don't do the follow-up 6 months after you open the case. You do it 6 months after they're released on aftercare. That is in here. So, here it is, under 6 months. Under your 6 month definition, that's on page 4. This is the follow-up on the status or progress made 6 months from the date of intake in non-custody cases. For aftercare or custody cases, this is 6 months from the date that the client is released from the residential facility to CBP aftercare services. So do y'all understand that? We're not going to duplicate, and we're not going to We're not gonna measure while they're still in the facility. We're gonna measure 6 months after they're on aftercare.
So Madeline, if the kid is, there's a non-custody case that's open, and then the kid is committed to DYS, and then the kid is released to aftercare, the same provider or different provider, I guess. When the kid is released, do you do an intake at that point?
No, the intake was done when they were committed.
Okay. So when they're released, you don't do anything, you do one of these 6 months after they are released.
And that would be a case that goes from non-custody to custody, because you have already done an intake on a non-custody case, and then the court says you got to leave town by sundown. So those are non-custody cases that morph into custody cases. There's some kids that end up becoming custody cases that your agencies haven't seen, and that's not your fault, but that's the reality. And so when those kids come back to you for aftercare, then that's when you would do an intake on them. So we want to follow. This form follows a kid.
Well, the intake is done when the kid is committed.
Yes.
Intake and commitment,
Right.
and then it comes back, and then that interval starts. Thank you, Bonnie. Yeah.
So with the non-custody case, once they're committed to, once they become a custody case, we don't have to worry about the non-custody case doing a discharge or anything on that.
You did it.
You do the discharge.
You did the discharge when they got committed. You did the discharge on the
We do
non-custody.
have to do that.
You don't do the follow-up.
Okay, just gonna do the follow-up.
Right. You'll do the discharge, and it'll show, you know, the worst thing that could happen when the kid got committed. You see? And then you'll do the intake,
For the custody.
right, for the custody case.
Okay.
But then you won't do the 6 month until they've been released on aftercare for 6 months, because you won't have anything to report.
What about a transfer?
Okay, explain that to me, what you mean.
They return to the community, but they're moving to a different catchment area, and we transfer.
Well, they should still have that case in right track.
Okay.
So
So,
you may have to look and see
so we don't do the discharge
the discharge from,
in right track. If we're discharging them from our service and handing them to another provider, what are we supposed to do?
Melissa, what's the process in right track? Okay, say the kid started out with you, but upon release, they're not gonna be placed in District 1. They're gonna be placed because of DCFS, because that's logical. DCFS says, no, we're placing them in Fort Smith.
well,
So
then,
you release the kid and Youth Bridge is responsible for, CJS is responsible for aftercare. Do you do a discharge and she does an intake?
No, it's just a transfer.
I wouldn't, no.
You
You wouldn't
just
do
pick
it in
up-
right track.
You just pick it up where the other one left off.
Otherwise, you're gonna duplicate.
Okay.
So you would use the same intake.
Right. They already, the information shouldn't change about the status of the kid.
Because it's a custody case, so there
Right.
isn't a discharge when it goes from one CDP to the other.
Right,
Just
in
like
our
when it
files,
goes,
there is a discharge. I mean, we put a discharge.
well, yeah, in terms
Yeah, but that's only on the agency level, though.
But you don't need to do one of these. Y'all have a lot, we have a lot of words that are used interchangeably. You know that you're gonna close your case, we know that. But for these purposes and for the right track purposes, we're not gonna do any discharge in there because we wouldn't normally do that if it was our case. So the transferring, the agency that's picking them up is gonna pick up on your case, and they'll do the 6 month follow-up, 6 months after they're released.
So
They're still open with DYS, though,
Oh, yes.
the deal, that's the deal.
Yes, exactly.
You
Yes.
often can close them in out tonight.
the reports that we're getting now that say a 6 month follow-up is due or whatever, is that going to be corrected in right track so that we're not getting it on kids who are still residential?
Yes.
To get the 3 month?
Yes.
Yeah, there's no more 3 months.
Yes. As of July 1st.
actually, that had already been done away with, but it had been corrected in
Yeah.
I'm sorry, yes.
Okay, just one question, just clarification. If we're in court and the judge, this is the first time they're hearing this case, but they committed to DYS and they assigned them to a PC, or to a provider at the time. Does the provider, do we do the intake or DYS do the intake?
Well, you would do the intake for your aftercare case,
Okay.
because you would open a case if that you had not had them on services before, right?
DYS is the only, DYS intake are the only ones that can open a DYS custody case.
Okay, I'm saying that the judge report ordered to Phoenix that day and committed to DYS that day. And so.
You run it under the,
Right. You would do
custody
your
case.
intake. You're gonna open your aftercare case and start working it. It's gonna be opened as an aftercare case at your agency, because committed to you, you're gonna have a custody case. Then you would do this. DYS is not gonna do this for them, okay?
Okay, that's fine.
You will find the case already in there. that
Right.
is completed by DYS. You'll do your CBP juvenile services form and this form to go along with.
Okay, any other questions from this area?
Yes, sir.
You have an asterisk here. Yes.
Okay, one thing we have a point that is, that is receiving DYS services while in a treatment facility, but it also has aftercare is open already. Does the CDP do the DYS client performance measure for 6 months and the residential program also as well?
Are you saying that they've been committed and placed at a DYS facility? Okay, you're not doing 6 months on that. When the kid gets out on aftercare.
That's when we pick up, while they're in the program, it's the.
No, DYS is not. This is a community-based provider outcome measurement form. We're not measuring what residential services are doing.
So you would do an intake for a committed kid, and then once he or she returns to your community, that's when the timetable begins, that you would do a 6-month follow-up after the kid returns home.
Right.
That's right. Okay.
Let me ask you a question. Does that apply to, say, for example, if the kid is on 6 months aftercare at the end of 6 months here, what if you go to at a review hearing, the judge wants to extend it in for another 2 or 3 months or whatever time? Do you do the 6 months follow up at that time, or what do you do?
You do the 6-month
If
follow-up.
it's beyond the 6 months, the judge wants.
You only do the 6-month follow-up one time. You do the 6-month follow-up 6 months after you started providing services. And then you do a discharge, and that's it. You don't do anything else in between. Okay? That's all that this process is set up to do. Okay?
And then the follow-up after.
Right. But he was talking about while they're still on service. Okay. You see the asterisk on your form, it tells you if aftercare, this is 6 months after release from residential, that you're going to start doing these core outcome measures for all DYS community services. And let me tell you, the reason we are calling these the core outcomes are because these are the ones that there is an expectation that every CBP has services that address these 3 areas, and you are expected to fill that out. You're expected to report on the school, family, and justice system. Every CBP is. Okay? Those are the 4. And those are the things that your effectiveness or your outcomes are going to be measured in, are these 3 areas. Now, it doesn't mean that you don't need to fill out the auxiliary outcomes that are below that Janice is going to cover with you. This just means that these are the ones that we know our core services address.
I like the additional information.
The core, just to say that in a different way, these core outcome measures those apply to every kid. If you have a 10-year-old or if you have a 20-year-old, all of them will have issues that need to be addressed with school, family, and justice system. Because you'll see even under school, if you're dealing with an older child, an older juvenile, then it talks about vocational programs and post-high school issues. So those have to be reported on every single kid. The auxiliary outcomes at the bottom, it's not that we don't want you to report on them. It's that we recognize that those will not be applicable to every kid. So not every kid is going to have substance abuse issues. Not every kid is going to have, you've got a 12-year-old, there's no reason to report on employment, because we know the 12-year-old is never going to be employed. That's not a bad thing. And so when we're talking about accountability, we're not going to hold you accountable if you're not finding jobs for your 12-year-olds. We're not going to hold you accountable if you're not, you don't offer substance abuse services in your area and you're getting some poor outcomes in substance abuse. That is a need that we as a system need to address, but it's not something that you are responsible for if that's not in your contract that you have to provide. So that's the difference between those two.
Okay, so basically, you're gonna do your intake. If your kid wasn't in the program but like for 4 months, you don't even have to complete this form, just do the discharge.
If you did the intake and they were only had 4 months of services, then no, you can't do a 6 month.
Right.
Just do
The discharge.
You do the intake, the discharge, and then follow up within 6 months after discharge.
Okay.
And Right Track's not going to tell you to do 6 months after you close, when they offer services.
Okay.
If they do, we need to know. Okay? When something goes different than what's in these instructions, Melissa needs to know. Actually, I'd like to know too, because I'd like to know how well our process is working and whether or not what we told you all is accurate or not.
Carmen needs to know so she can push it up the loop to get it fixed faster.
Please. I've got cards up here that have my email address on them. Please use it.
And let me give you my email address too. It's Madeline, MADELYN, dot Keith, KEITH, at EAYS.org. Because our committee's not going to just stop working on this because we've completed the training. We're going to continue to stay after it. So we want to hear what your issues are, yes.
Could you repeat your email address again, please?
Madeline, MADELYN, dot Keith, KEITH, at EAYS.org. So when you send your email to Carmen and to Melissa, just copy me on it, and I'm going to try to keep a folder on all of those when we see that things aren't working accurately. Yes, sir.
Yes. This might be going a little bit off of what we're talking about, but it's pertaining to family on the loss of young career family. I never fully quite understood what that actually is.
Okay, we'll go to each one of those and talk about those so that to kind of help you understand where we're coming from. I know we haven't thought of every single possibility. We tried to, we rehashed them over and over again, but we thought we think we have an area that hopefully you can fit your youth situation in. And I think you had a comment that someone else, did you have a comment earlier? I think you were saying something positive and we wanted to hear that.
I was just saying, I really appreciate the additional information on the categories that you had.
Oh, good. Good, we like that. Oh, you mean like where it tells you within the last 30 days? Good. Yeah, we felt like that the person filling out the form, might need a reminder and without having to go back to their manual. Pretty soon, hopefully, they'll get it figured out after they've done it a few times. Okay, under school, let's just go through and see if there's anything under that you have a question about. We know that the best possible thing they can score, the numeric values 1 through 6. Also, we are considering, make sure I say this right, we consider that anytime they increase their score, that's progress, and that's going to be counted as some measure of success. because right now, with the report that we're gonna be doing, we can only measure if they progress at all. We can't measure at this point degrees of success. So if your client progresses at all, it's gonna get counted as a success, Bonnie.
And I can see where this could become an issue because
Okay.
if at intake, that now that we work with older kids, they may have actually completed high school or a GED. So you may mark 6.
Okay,
While you're working with them, you may actually get them enrolled in a vocational school or college.
true.
And when you discharge them, they might then be a 4 or 5, and it would appear that they had gotten worse, when in actuality, they had improved.
But if 6 is the best you can possibly be on that scale, I think, how many times do you think that's gonna happen? A lot or not very often?
Well, I think to Bonnie's point, that if you do intake on a child who's already completed his or her GED, or completed high school, they get a 6.
Right.
And to your point, that you would have enrolled them in ASU
Right.
or a vocational program, and then they would score less than 6.
I think that comments would be the place where you would explain that. See the comments?
Well,
Which one do you choose?
you know, I guess I would want to tell my staff that, you don't want to put something lesser if they haven't actually gone down on their scale. Because, the comments are not going to show up when I'm just wondering if we should have had.
The comments are not gonna show up, or comments?
Well, I mean, when you just do data,
Okay.
that, you're not going, you have to go back and search comments to try to find out something.
And we would
I just wonder.
I see what you're saying, it's still gonna get counted.
Right, I'm just wondering if like 3, 4, 5, and 6 should have said pre-secondary, pre-college, and then there had been a 7 that said attending post-high school.
I said we had Bonnie to
What?
I said we add you to the committee. But I think that's a good point. We probably need to look at the language in those categories of providing greater definition.
What would be without going back and redoing this at this point, what would be